Fabulous. Well, friends, welcome to our Wisconsin Biographies web. I'm Senior Education Specialist at PBS Wisconsin, and it is a privilege to be here with you today. This week's webinar is extra special because Debbie Burmeister from Tullar Elementary School in Neenah is joining us to talk about how she uses Wisconsin Biographies with her fourth grade students. During the webinar, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat. My colleague, Neenah, will be moderating the chat. I always like to start with a quote from Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers said, "The most important people in a child's life are parents and teachers. That means parents and teachers are the most important people in the world." At PBS Wisconsin, we couldn't agree more. We believe teachers are among the most influential figures in children's lives. You are their mentors, guides, and tireless champions. Thank you. At PBS Wisconsin, we have a commitment to support teachers in sparking curiosity and empowering their students, setting them on a path of lifelong learning. It's our goal to provide equitable access to high-quality educational resources to meet learner and educator needs. So let's get started. You can access our content at pbswisconsineducation.org. Whoops. 1 second. I'm having a little bit of a challenge sharing the website. There. Hey, Neenah, can you see our website?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. On our PBS Wisconsin Education website, on our homepage, you'll find a collection of featured resources. Our at-home learning resources include a curriculum-related broadcast schedule and supplemental learning resources. You can also click on the Browse Resources tab for an alphabetical listing of the content we have. Wisconsin Biographies is a collection of stories about notable figures in Wisconsin's history and the impact they've had on our world. Wisconsin Biographies is intended for students in grades 3 through 8. There are 15 stories. And if you follow my mouse or my cursor during the presentation, you'll see the pieces that I'm highlighting. So right now I'm hovering over the Stories tab, and you can see a list of the 15 biographies that we currently have available. Today we're going to look at Gaylord Nelson, A Vision for the Earth. Using Wisconsin Biographies, for each story, students will be able to describe who is this person? What did they do? Why are they considered important? How did they change the lives of people in the past and in the present? And what impact will their actions have on future generations? Each biography includes an animated video, 2 student activities, digital and print biographies, historical images, web resources, and this Teachers tab has teaching tips. So to start out with, I'm going to show just a couple minutes of the Gaylord Nelson video.
You hear the word ecology. That's a big science, not a narrow one. It's a big concept. And it is concerned with all the ramifications of all the relationships of all living creatures to each other and their environment.
This is me with my father. My name is Tia Nelson, and my dad was Gaylord Nelson. He is known as the father of Earth Day, a vision he had for teachers all across the country to talk about the environment. Maybe you've heard of Earth Day. Maybe you've even participated in an Earth Day event. Before he was the father of Earth Day, before he was my dad, he was a little boy growing up in Clear Lake in northern Wisconsin. He loved spending time outdoors, exploring the forests, lakes, and streams of the region. Nature was his playground. As he was growing up, he also got to know the world of civics and government through his parents.
And so I went to political meetings with my father and my mother from the time I was in grade school. Whenever a speaker came within driving distance in our Model T Ford, the way we went, 40, 50, 60 miles sometimes, just to hear somebody, hear one of the La Follettes give a speech.
My father was inspired, and he started thinking about a future for himself, running for elected office. That stayed with him as he went to college and then law school, through his time in the U.S. Army during World War II. When he came back to Wisconsin, he was ready to get his career in politics going. He ran for the state senate and then for governor of Wisconsin. As governor, he worked on government reform, social justice causes, and environmental issues. He created new jobs for young people, designated lands for public parks, and worked to conserve our beautiful lakes and rivers. He accomplished a lot for the people of Wisconsin, and he wanted to make an even bigger impact. So he ran for the U.S. Senate to represent Wisconsin citizens in the nation's capital. And he won. But when he got to Washington, D.C., he found out that others in government just didn't seem to care about the environment as much as he did. A national conservation tour with President Kennedy didn't accomplish what he hoped it would. And few senators would support the laws that he proposed to protect our environment. Some years later, he went to visit the site of an oil spill and was devastated by the damage he saw. On the plane ride home, he read an article about anti-war teach-ins on college campuses. That's when he got an idea.
Teach-ins on the campuses, teach-ins on the Vietnam War. And I thought, that's a good idea. Why can't we have a nationwide, quote, teach-in on the environment? That's where the concept of Earth Day came from.
The idea for a teach-in about the environment started to spread.
All right, so you'll have to finish the video on your own later. So let's look below the video player, and you see a collection of historical images. Historical photos are a text too. And I recommend that you invite your students to examine the photos, have them look at the people, the objects, and the activities taking place in each of the photos. Ask them, based on what you observe, what might you infer from the photo? What questions do you still have? And where can you find the answers to your questions? In the Wisconsin Biographies, you'll also find a collection of biographies. You'll see that they're written at 3 different reading levels. There's an ebook available for free from iTunes and a print piece. And here's what the print pieces look like. Notice that they have a glossary and a table of contents. And check out the historical photographs included with the subtext. And bold print for the vocabulary. You can find the Lexile Key for these biographies in the Teaching tab. And you'll see in the lower right-hand corner, that's where you'll find the Reading Lexile Key. In the Teaching tab, you also find teaching tips, and I'm on the right-hand side of my screen. Each biography includes a story summary and guiding questions. I'll give you a moment to read the guiding questions for Gaylord Nelson, A Vision for the Earth. Using the guiding questions before viewing the video really helps improve student comprehension. There are additional lessons, including this one on comparing texts. And with the lessons, the graphic organizers needed for each lesson are included. I forgot to share the academic standards. For Wisconsin Biographies, the biographies connect to Wisconsin Standards for Social Studies, for English Language Arts, and in the case of the Gaylord Nelson piece, the Wisconsin Standards for Environmental Literacy and Sustainability. There are 2 interactives for each of the biographies. Let's check out the idea map. The idea map gives students an opportunity to demonstrate their understanding of the content. If you look on the left-hand side of my screen, you'll see that students can create webs, topic charts, cause and effect charts, plot diagrams, Venn diagrams, and timelines. And there are even examples of student work. Making an idea map is simple. Your students select the type of chart they want to create. They can adjust their chart. And then to demonstrate their understanding, they add text. And so for the main idea for the Gaylord Nelson piece, I would write that the environment was a top priority for Gaylord Nelson. And then students have to provide the supporting details. Nelson worked to conserve lakes and rivers. And then they add pictures. They can add backgrounds, images, and something that I think is really cool, they can also add their own photographs. And so for the statement, Nelson worked to conserve lakes and rivers, I was able to use a picture of me and my dad out on one of the lakes in northern Wisconsin. When students are done, they click the done button and they have the opportunity to then mail the idea mapper to you, print it out for, well, when you're back in school for small group discussions, or to create a link for your classroom website. And then for the trading card application, students can synthesize their learning by creating a trading card. And for both of the applications, if you'll see on the left-hand side of my screen, I'm clicking on teaching guides for each of the applications. Okay. Oops. Now, I'm going to go into another one of our biographies, and this biography is Millie Szanto, Wisconsin Biographies, and I'm only going to play 30 seconds of this video, but I'd like to give you a taste of what it's about.
Have you ever flipped over a plastic bottle and seen a triangle with a number on the bottom? That little number is a clue to the story of Millie Szanto, a Wisconsinite whose ingenuity and activism changed recycling all over the world. When Millie heard that the landfill in Sauk County was going to close early, she was worried. It was only 5 years old.
So Millie developed the idea for the numbering system to identify plastics in recycling. She is also she also helped with writing Wisconsin's recycling laws. And at this time, I would like to invite my colleague, Mia Forsland, to talk a little bit about the Millie Szanto story and why we did this piece.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Mia Forsland. I'm an education producer with our PBS Wisconsin education team. And for Millie Szanto's story, it all started at the very beginning of our Wisconsin Hometown Stories Sauk Prairie project. We gathered some initial information from educators and community members and learned about some of the people that students in Sauk Prairie learn about from their community. And Millie's name was one of those names that we first heard of. And from there, we gathered a group of educators together who became kind of our advisory group and shared with them some of the people that we were considering for a story who we wanted to highlight from their community. And they pointed us to Millie's story as one that they thought was very inspiring to their students. You know, she saw a problem in her community and she didn't, sit by. She decided to take action, and she encountered many challenges throughout the process of figuring out how to recycle plastics, but she persevered and kept going. So they wanted that story to be one that could be shared with more students, with more educators, and throughout the state. And with that advisory group, we were thrilled to be able to continue our connection to them throughout the process of developing the resources. As we were working on the biography books and on the video, checked in with educators and had them share some of those materials with students as well. And Debbie, who you'll hear from in just a little bit, was gracious enough to take a look at the books in addition to some of the Sauk Prairie educators, because she is an expert with Wisconsin Biographies. So we were thrilled to have all of that feedback come together to be able to make the resources and to do some additional playtesting before they were released for everyone to explore and enjoy.
Mia, thanks for sharing that. You bring up something that's just really important. At PBS Wisconsin, when we create content for teachers and students, we work with teacher advisory groups and do play testing in classrooms. So I'm glad you brought that up, Mia, which is a great segue to the highlight of today's webinar. It is my privilege to welcome Debbie Burmeister to this webinar. As I stated at the beginning of the webinar, Debbie is a fourth grade teacher at Tullar Elementary School in Neenah, and she has been an advisor on a number of the projects that we have created and has become a great friend. Debbie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us today, and you'll need to unmute yourself.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. As Kristin said, I am a fourth grade teacher in Neenah, and I have been using the Wisconsin Biographies for many, many years. Biographies is one of our reading modules that we have to do. And so I was trying to come up with something fun for the kids to do, but yet interesting from the Wisconsin perspective. So I do not assign kids certain people. They choose their own person, so many kids can choose the same person. I encourage them to read all of them, to look and to learn about each of them. I also use the books in guided reading. So the kids, I put them in their ebooks, and my kids are able to access them, but I use them for guided reading as well. So I want to make sure that my struggling readers are successful, but I also use them for my higher readers as well. I am going to show you one quick thing, hopefully. Now, this will be a challenge for me, as I've not done this part before.
That's okay, Debbie. Right now, what we're seeing is you're clicking on Sophie Johnson.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want you to see.
Good.
Okay. So this is something that I created. We do 3 reads. So we do close reading for part of our biography unit. So the very first read that they go through their book, they find the basic information. They find out who they are, their birthdays, all the basic biography information. And then they just try to figure out what was the problem or the challenge this particular person was trying to overcome. When we go to our second read, we are digging deeper. We want to know a little bit more about this, the events that took place in this person's life, and what did they do about that event. Every biography, these people are overcoming something or they're reacting to something. So we want to highlight that in our classroom with what the event was and what the reaction was. This is Elizabeth Baird, if I remember correctly, the woman that lived in Green Bay. She married if I remember correctly, an attorney, and she moved there. She's from Mati woman. So we just go through all the events, almost like the plot line, and we go through and look deeper at the reactions to those events. They have to put together some interesting facts and some quotes if those are in there. They mostly find the quotes from the video. So they're using multiple sources, not only the book, but also the video. And then we call the third read a part of our close reading is the third read is where you really dig for the treasure. And so now we're really trying to figure out the characteristics of this person. What do we know about them, and what evidence do we have that supports that from their reading? And then we also synthesize, how has this person made a difference in the world around us? Because that's the reason why we have a biography about them. We want to know more than just, this person was very helpful. What did she do? But how did she make a difference in the world? Because that's what our biographies are really all about. One more thing that we do is we put together a script, and we come up with a news show. And the child who read this one, I believe, is Dr. Kate. And they write a script, and they have to have the answer, and they and a partner get together, and they make a little movie. They put together a little movie of, and they use a green screen, and they interview each other. So they really, again, synthesize who this person is, what this is all about, and why this person is important. We really dig deeper into this person, and how do I stop? There it is.
I'll tell you. Hey, can you share that video?
Oh, sure.
I would love to see that.
Oh, sure. It's only a little minute. That's all.
Oh, no, that would be awesome. One of my colleagues, Jesse Nixon, is on, and so is Ian, and they work with youth media producers, and these are budding producers right here.
We do this with almost every unit. We put something together because it really motivates the kids to read and understand what's happening. So, all right, so here is Dr. Kate.
Hello, thank you for coming, Bella. Thank you for having me.
Oh, Bella.
So, your first event was being born. When were you born and where? I was born in a small cabin on April 21st, 1859. Where did you live when you were young? When I was 3, I moved to Baraboo, Wisconsin. How many siblings did you have during that move? One brother, his name was Roy. Wonderful. What were your parents' names? My mom's name was Mary, and my dad is Anson. How old were you when you attended college? And where? I was 16 and very lucky to attend college at this age, and I attended UW-Madison. Very nice. You get married? Yes. To Babel Follett. Good. What were you trying to change in this world? I was trying to make girls all over the world be able to vote and only wear bloomers because a corset is uncomfortable and they should not try to make us look different. Did you succeed? Yes, it worked very well. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.
Yay! Debbie, that's awesome.
So they had to produce it all They had to come up with the questions. I have a green screen I set up a green screen in my classroom, and we have a tripod for the iPad, and they have to have a camera person. They do all of that. I'm standing there, I'm watching them, I'm working with other kids while they're finishing up, but they put it all together. They have someone turning their script for them on a piece of paper. And then when we refer to these people in the future, so we do this October, November, maybe, they remember these people very well. When we talk about World War II, they remember Fish Harnack. They remember Bob La Follette when we talk about industry in social studies. So my students really understand all of these people. I use C.B. Clarke as my mentor text. So when I am teaching my kids to do that dig deeper graphic organizer, I use C.B. Clarke, and that's because he's from Neenah. So the kids really know who C.B. Clarke is. Half my class's parents work for Kimberly-Clark. So they know this, they understand this. I will say the highlight is the video. My kids absolutely love those videos. They would play them all day long, every day. We don't use the videos in guided reading. I only use the books in guided reading. And that's a big piece of my intervention, I don't know what you all call it, flex time or whatever. But if I have to pull small groups, I am using those books. And it may not even be a biography time period. I'm still going to pull that if it's informational writing or reading. I don't know if you have questions.
I can turn it over for questions. Muna, you can unmute people. We can try that. But boy, Debbie, if I had children, I certainly would want them in your classroom. Wow, you're doing some great things.
Thank you.
Are there questions for Debbie?
Jesse asked, what did students use to make the video?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Thank you. We are a one-to-one iPad district. We use the green screen app Do Ink, and they record the video right on their camera roll, and then we put the green screen behind them. They go out and find a background. They do all of this. No, it doesn't happen September 1. We practice, we make silly videos so that they could then make great content. Could we have a bigger board for our scripts? Yes. There's certain things we could improve on. We just use a microphone. If a kid is really quiet, I do have a snowball microphone in my classroom we can set up, because we do a lot of global phone calls, so that we talk to classrooms all over pretty much the country, not necessarily globally other than Canada. But I have microphones available to me, but we mostly use an iPad and the Do Ink app. Great question.
Yeah. If there are any other questions, now is the time to add them to the chat box. Otherwise, someone named Lynn said that was great. Thank you for sharing that.
I highly recommend the leveled books. I really do like the leveled books. I have critiqued them for Maya, I believe she writes them. So we really worked hard to make sure they are 3 levels very clearly. And the kids can see that progression.
Becky said, thank you so much for sharing the student work. The video was awesome. And I agree. That was so fun to see.
My favorite part was when she stumbled over the word bloomers.
She doesn't even know what bloomers are. But she knows that was bad. Those are last year's students. For some reason, I couldn't find this year's videos, but those were last year's students.
They were great.
Are there some student favorites? What do you notice year after year? What are some of the favorite videos or biographies?
I would say Dr. Kate is a huge hit. They really find it fascinating that in that time period that there was a doctor that would go out on snowshoes. They find that absolutely fascinating. This year I did Gaylord Nelson for Earth Day, which is so not in the biography unit, but going digitally, I had posted the link for that. And my kids were really excited to see that. They knew all about Earth Day. So that's going to be a big hit, I know, next year. Chief Oshkosh is a good one, but that's, again, we're really close to Oshkosh. So they know, they've seen the statue of Chief Oshkosh. So they like that. I'm trying to think of...
I think those community connections that you make, Deb, are so awesome and impactful for kids. So I'm actually from Minocqua, Wisconsin, where Dr. Kate was from. And I know that some of the teachers up there take students to the Dr. Kate Museum after they've done the Dr. Kate biography.
Oh, nice.
So being able to connect it to the community that the kiddos live in is really impactful.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, is there a Les Paul one too?
Yes.
Okay, so Les Paul is also a huge hit because they know, they know music. So they know who Les Paul is. And then they do, what's exciting is once they get hooked, they do extra research on their own. So they get excited about learning more and more and more about these people.
Okay. A couple more questions. One of them is my own. Do you have students use the interactive where they make their own trading cards?
That's you know what, as Kristin was explaining that, I have not done that, and I'm thinking I'm going to next year. I wrote myself a note, actually, and I have a running note for things to do next year, and I really like how easy that is. Kristin and I have never gone through that, and I think that's going to be a really fun addition as a choice for my kids to use. I really think that will be, I really like the plot line. And I think that's going to be very beneficial in my classroom.
Yeah. Okay. Jessie asked, I'm wondering about how or where you assign the different leveled iBooks to students with the 3 levels.
Oh, that's a great question. Based on their level that they come into in 4th grade, so that would come from the 3rd grade teachers, then I would look through the books and I would put in and tell the students, you're going to, or actually, I think in my ebooks, I can actually assign certain kids certain books. We have ebooks on our iPads, so I am able to, I'm pretty sure it's called ebooks. I think it's just an app. I'm able to put books in there and assign them to certain kids. So it would be in their library, the student library, and not just everybody's library. So that's how I can level that. You could certainly tell the kids to use that level. Nobody knows. You would have that private conversation. Nobody's going to know that they're reading which book. My kids like to read level 1 and call it a day. So, you know, I do have real ordinary kids. They will read level 1, call it a day, and then I will make them read level 2. And then if I know that they're capable, I make them read level 3 as well. So they're everyday kids.
And I remember you said that you use them for close reading. And with the ebooks, what's so great is that they can use their fingertips to highlight the evidence that they have to find within the book.
Yes, and that is a huge piece to anything that we read. Where's your evidence? Another thing that you made mention was those guided questions. I made myself a mental note about that too, because that will help at my guided reading table to really focus in, hone in on the right questions, not just the overall reading skill, but now that digging deeper questions too.
Awesome. There is another question in the chat, and Mia, it's actually going to be a great question for you if you would unmute yourself. The question is, I'll actually read the whole thing. What a great collection of biographies. I can't wait to use this more in my classroom. Yay! Do you know if there will be any new biographies added to this collection in the future? How about that question, Mia?
That is a great question, and we're very excited that, yes, we will be continuing to add to the collection, and we're actually just at the beginning of work on another story. And this one will be connected to the Wisconsin Hometown Stories Stevens Point project. So we are in the very beginning of working on that story, and I'm actually going to toss this to my colleague and fellow producer, Jessie Nixon, who's on the webinar right now, because she is doing the research and getting ready to start work on the resources for someone from Stevens Point.
Hi, everybody. As Mia said, I've been doing research on potential characters for Stevens Point, and I have two options that I'd like to share with you all, and actually kind of get your feedback if you have a moment. I'll send out just a really short survey, or you can just put your comments in the chat box, or we can talk. But I'm very excited to share these with you. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see that all right?
Yes.
Great. Oops, nope. Okay, I'll tell you about our first character. Her name is Carrie Frost. And Carrie Frost, she was in Stevens Point, and she loved to fly fish, which then and also today was considered, when Carrie was fishing, it was considered a male sport. But she fly fished with her father, and she loved it so much. And she noticed one day that fish were not biting the ties that they were using, because at that time, all of the ties were made in Europe. And so they were being sent over to Wisconsin and fish weren't biting. So Carrie thought, what if we made ties that actually looked like the kinds of things that fish were biting in Wisconsin? And so she started taking together feathers and fur from different animals and making ties. And so her and her father started using them out in the water, and quickly people took notice that fish were biting. And so they started asking Carrie to make flies. So demand kept growing and growing. She was making them in her kitchen. And then she solicited the help of her housekeeper, but then demand kept growing. So to keep up with the demand, Carrie she started a store, a manufacturing warehouse. She called it CJ Frost. And the reason being that she thought at that time that men would not buy ties that were made by a woman. So she hid the gender of the company. At one point, Carrie employed over 150 people. Almost all of them were women. I saw this amazing picture of a company picnic, and it was just 150 women that were tying flies. Then Carrie opened up housing so that women could actually live there on the property and make their own money. So at this, what we'd like to do with Carrie, the story itself is really very interesting. And our goal would be to teach learning goals having to do with women and prejudices and barriers that they face in U.S. and Wisconsin history. And then think about things like the barriers that women faced in earning their own wages, owning property. While Carrie wasn't out protesting about the women's suffrage movement, she lived during that exact same time period. And actually the year that she sold her property was the year that women got the right to vote. So it's very closely aligned with that time period. That's a little bit about Carrie. Our second story right now is George Stevens. The name might give it away what George did, but George is a little bit earlier in the history of Wisconsin. But George Stevens was a logger, and he actually came up to Wisconsin looking for a place to build a mill. And he came up and put all of his equipment in one place, and then opened up the first shanty and the first manufacturer, actually in Wausau. But he kept his tools and his equipment just south of Wausau. And so people started calling it Stevens Point because that's where all of his stuff was kept. So Stevens is credited with really starting the logging boom in Wisconsin. And I don't know as much about him yet, but that's where we're kind of starting. And what we'd like to do with Stevens' story would be more focusing on logging as an industry in Wisconsin and kind of how it shaped the history and economy when Stevens was alive, and maybe how what that means for us today. But also to look at early Wisconsin, what it might be like to be a sawmill worker or an early lumberjack in Wisconsin. Those are our two stories that we're interested in. And we're also interested, especially if you're from Stevens Point or you know of other people that we should think about, that would be wonderful. I'm going to put in the chat box a link to a survey if you have any feedback about Stevens or Carrie Frost. We would love to make sure that it's something that you would use in your classroom.
May I fill out the survey too, Jessie?
Please. I'll put it in there in just a minute.
Are there other questions?
Deborah just mentioned that there's a great piece on suffrage in the Oshkosh hometown story. And this would be a great for logging piece to learn about the development of our state. So she kind of alluded to what you had said. And then Kimberly votes for Stevens.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for anyone on this call today?
Remember, you have to unmute your microphone if you have a question, or type it in the chat. Well, friends, this webinar has been recorded, and it will be made available on our PBS Wisconsin Education.org website. You'll be able to find it at pbswisconsineducation.org/events. I'll also be sending out a post-event email with links to the things that we've talked about. And you know what, Jessie, I can even include the survey in that post-event email. If you are someone that would like a certificate of participation for your professional development portfolio, would you mention it in the chat? Just say, I'm Becky, send me a certificate of participation. And then I'd just like to end by saying thank you so much for sharing your day with me. You are truly doing amazing work in Wisconsin and are exactly what making a difference looks like. Thanks for joining us today. And really, Debbie, thank you for sharing the work that your students are doing and the awesome things that you're doing in your classroom. It makes me want to go back in the classroom. How exciting. And I do know that my colleagues, Mia, I have to look around the Brady Bunch screen here. Mia and Jessie and Ian, it even looks like maybe David's on the phone call, wanted to chat with our friends from Stevens Point. Is that still true, Mia?
If we have any educators here that are in Stevens Point schools, we would love for you to share your thoughts about the people that we're looking at for stories, and to keep connected and let us know if you'd like to receive additional updates as we're getting ready to take next steps with the project.
And that's a wrap, friends, on the webinar piece. So thank you all for being here.